Welcome to NTD News. I'm Jasmina Davis. Here are today's top stories. Police shot dead the suspect of the Portland murder. The man was armed and avoiding arrest. He was a member of the extremist group Antifa. President Trump receives a warm welcome in Pennsylvania. He says the enthusiasm for his campaign in the run-up to the November beats the support he garnered in the 2016 election. First Lady Melania Trump hosts a roundtable in honor of National Recovery Month. She said finding solutions to the nation's drug problem is important to her, especially as it affects children and families. Nancy Pelosi blamed a hair salon in San Francisco for apparently setting her up. Now the salon's owner claims Pelosi's statement cannot be true. And Facebook says it's banning political ads 1 week before the November election. The company says it is trying to limit misinformation on its platform. The suspect in a fatal Portland shooting was killed during an arrest in Washington. The man was a member of the extremist group Antifa.
Law enforcement remains on the scene where Michael Forrest Reinl was killed on Thursday night. Reinl was suspected of shooting dead a President Trump supporter in Portland over the weekend. Reinl was killed during an arrest. Law enforcement officers in Lacey, Washington described Reinl as armed. Reinl, avoiding arrest, made it to a vehicle before shots were fired. A spokesman for the Fugitive Task Force said initial reports indicate the suspect produced a firearm, threatening the lives of law enforcement officers. Task Force members responded to the threat and struck the suspect, who was pronounced dead at the scene. He was a member of the anarcho-communist Antifa network. Reinl attended a number of protests and riots in Portland in recent months. He was suspected of killing 39-year-old Aaron J. Danielson, a supporter of the conservative Patriot Prayer Group. Danielson was shot in the chest Saturday night in downtown Portland. The far-left group Antifa has been linked to violence in multiple states, including California, Wisconsin, and Washington.
President Trump rallying supporters in Pennsylvania. He says his base is bigger and stronger than in 2016, now just weeks ahead of the election.
So thank you, Pennsylvania, very much. I'm thrilled to be in.
President Trump receiving a warm welcome at Latrobe, Pennsylvania. He showed optimism about his support base in the lead up to the election, reassuring the crowd that economic recovery is on its way.
I think we're way ahead of what we were 4 years ago, and there's far more enthusiasm. Our base is bigger, it's stronger, and we've done the greatest job. Again, if we didn't get hit by the plague from China.
He said he'd built up the U.S. economy before and promised to do it again. The president warned that the Democratic Party has swung further to the left than it traditionally stood.
The radical left has captured the party. They even elected a person that nobody ever heard of, a senator, it's been a while, against a young, good-looking Kennedy by 10 points in Massachusetts.
He's referring to incumbent Ed Markey, who beat Representative Joe Kennedy in the state's Democratic Senate primary late Tuesday. The president rallied his supporters with humor, touching on some policies championed by leftist groups that he said haven't worked out very well, like swapping plastic straws for paper ones. The president also commented on the recent controversy surrounding House Speaker Nancy Pelosi that is being dubbed Salon Gate. President Trump said Pelosi did not respond correctly to getting caught out visiting a hair salon in California.
You know what she should have done, honestly? She should have said, I made a mistake, sorry. And nobody would be talking about it. This is like the biggest story.
Pelosi broke rules she had publicly touted herself by not wearing a mask. She also went inside the hair salon despite rules allowing outside services only. She is receiving criticism for getting her hair done while pushing policies that mean hair salons are not allowed to open. Pelosi said that she was set up.
After Nancy Pelosi's infamous visit to a hair salon, some people expressed their feelings about it by hanging hair dryers in front of her house. Now the salon's owner is answering back to Pelosi's claim that she was set up.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to a closed hair salon in San Francisco has sparked significant backlash. She said she was set up by the salon and that she will take responsibility for falling for a setup.
I think that that this salon owes me an apology for setting up.
Some people weren't happy with Pelosi's action and the way she has responded. They placed hair dryers and other related items in front of Pelosi's house. Now, the salon's owner, Erica Cayos, made a public statement saying that she hadn't made the arrangements for Pelosi to get a treatment. She said the salon is rented out to individual stylists who all have 24/7 access and can enter via a code at the door.
I did not speak to Mrs. Pelosi or anyone associated with her about this appointment at any time.
She said she only found out the day before the treatment. She said she received the text message from stylist Jonathan Denard explaining that he had already arranged the appointment.
I told Jonathan that if Mrs. Pelosi came to the salon and felt safe doing so, he should speak to her about trying to get other salons to open everywhere and for everyone equally.
According to her, the speaker was very aware of what she was doing. She doesn't think that Pelosi's excuse is legitimate.
The speaker's excuse that she was set up is false. Jonathan did not tell her that the salon was allowed to do one-on-one service side. His text shows plainly that he told her the exact opposite.
The owner added that she considered Pelosi's visit to be highly hypocritical to business owners who have been forced to close.
It's National Recovery Month. The First Lady hosted an event focusing on substance abuse treatment and mental health services and how they can help people lead healthy lives.
First Lady Melania Trump hosted a roundtable at the White House Thursday on workplace sobriety and recovery. It focused on workplace resources and the role personal connections play in getting sober, themes shared in her Be Best initiative.
Finding solutions to our nation's drug problem has always been something I've cared deeply about, especially when it comes to its negative effects on children and families.
She said the pandemic has increased the risk of substance abuse, but the American people are strong and help one another in times of need. She was joined by people who are recovering from substance abuse or mental health issues.
And the First Lady.
National Economic Council Director Larry Kudlow also participated. He said he was a hopeless abuser of alcohol and drugs and had tried several times to get sober.
Like a lot of my peers and friends, I went through bloody hell and suffered significant consequences. I'm not alone. Most of us had the same troubles.
Now he's celebrating 25 years of sobriety.
It's not easy, but you can get sober and you can stay sober and you can lead a productive life. And most importantly, hopefully like myself, we can learn to help other people get sober and stay sober.
National Recovery Month is observed every September. It brings awareness to substance use treatment and how it can help people lead healthy lives.
Facebook is banning all new political advertisements during the 1 week leading up to the presidential election. It says it wants to limit misinformation on its platform. Here's the latest on the 2020 U.S. presidential election coverage. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg announced in a post the company's plan to limit political misinformation this election. The social media platform will ban all new political advertisements in the week prior to the election. In his post and Facebook's official statement, Zuckerberg said he felt concerned about the challenges people could face while voting, saying he's worried that with our nation so divided and election results potentially taking days or even weeks to be finalized, there could be an increased risk of civil unrest across the country. Zuckerberg said that while he generally believes the best antidote to bad speech is more speech, there might not be enough time in the final days before the election to clear up false or misleading information. Facebook will also limit the number of messages users can forward on the Messenger app and extend its partnership with election officials in its effort to remove misinformation about voting. Over the last 4 years, Facebook's involvement in political campaigns and removing information has met with controversy. Some are calling for the company to clamp down on misinformation, while others call into question the tech giant's ability to remain politically neutral. A media group must now register as a political committee because of its links to the Democratic Party. That's according to a new complaint, as NTD's Grace Coulter will tell us. A new complaint filed with the Federal Election Commission alleges that media group Courier Newsroom must register as a political committee. The media group, which includes several local news sites in swing states around the country, is owned and operated by the politically active nonprofit organization Acronym, run by Democratic strategist Tara McGowan. The complaint was filed by Americans for Public Trust, a watchdog group connected to former Nevada Attorney General Adam Laxalt. In the U.S., media outlets are exempt from federal election laws and regulations unless they are owned or controlled by a political party, committee, or candidate and are acting as a media outlet. The complaint alleges that Courier Newsroom is not eligible for this exemption and that it failed to register as a political group. Political groups are required under federal law to report their donors and expenses, something a registered media company does not need to do. Courier Newsroom calls itself a progressive media company owned by Acronym and other private investors. Its website states Courier Newsroom and its affiliated sites are independent from Acronym. Acronym's website states that it is a values-driven organization focused on advancing progressive causes through innovative communications, advertising, and organizing programs. The complaint points to a June 2019 Acronym internal memo where CEO Tara McGowan wrote that the group was launching a for-profit digital media company building out online news properties in 7 2020 battleground states. In the memo, McGowan also warned that Democrats are losing the media war online and laid out her plan for Courier Newsroom to counter the Republican advantage. This comes after last month Facebook announced a new policy that prevents U.S. news outlets with direct, meaningful ties to political groups from claiming the news exemption within its political ads authorization process. The new policy states that news pages with these affiliations will not be eligible for inclusion in Facebook News or have access to news messaging on the Messenger business platform. Since 2016, 1,200 political groups using the guise of local news sites have been uncovered by reporters and researchers. This was found among both conservative and left-leaning outlets. At present, the Federal Election Commission is overwhelmed with a backlog of campaign-related complaints, and without enough commissioners, will have to wait to formally vote on the complaint made against Courier Newsroom. Reporting by NTD's Grace Coulter. Up next, barbershops in Los Angeles reopened on Friday after another closure. That's after a second pandemic-related shutdown in July. And the NYPD chief of department says they've got enough cops to crack down on Labor Day weekend house parties. He's asking New Yorkers to keep their celebrations small. Find out more when we return. Los Angeles County has allowed hair salons and barbershops to reopen for the second time amid the pandemic. For now, they'll be limited to 25% capacity. Salons and barbershops have received the green light to reopen at limited capacity in LA. Brian DeKinia says he feels great about the news. The customer at Fades and Blades has been cutting his own hair since the pandemic started.
First haircut in 6 months. I've been shaving my head with clippers and doing a terrible job. Then I saw these guys cutting hair on the street last week.
Barbershops and salons were ordered to shut down in July after the state saw a spike in virus cases.
Well, we all came in this morning and started dancing together, and we were excited because we get to be back inside, and we got to be back in in a healthy, controlled environment. Our clients are going to be happier. We're going to be happier.
Barber George Hakopian called it a scary time for the industry. He's worked at Fades and Blades for 5 years. He says he fears another shutdown would mean closing their doors indefinitely.
We know a lot of our friends that have barbershops that are now shut down, or they've moved out of state so they can continue working and providing for their families. So for us, we definitely needed to keep going, and this is one step forward to continuing our business. Hopefully it picks up.
But for now, barbers and hairstylists seem happy just to see customers walk through their doors again. Hundreds of New York City restaurants joined a $2 billion lawsuit against the governor and mayor. Authorities are still not allowing indoor dining. The legal action comes as restaurants are in limbo about how they can keep their businesses open once it gets cold outside. NTD's Melina Weiskup has the story.
New York City gyms reopened Thursday, and next week, malls and casinos can reopen. But still, no indoor dining is allowed in the Big Apple. Restaurant owners are furious.
Because the traffic is at 40 miles an hour, and we have 4 tables on the street, and people are afraid to sit down.
But Mayor de Blasio simply said he feels confident in his decision keeping them closed, and hints that it's a long shot before they can reopen indoor seating. This Italian restaurant in Queens just filed a $2 billion lawsuit against Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio. Now, more than 350 other restaurants have signed on.
I am confident to win, or at least I can say that I am confident that this will get us reopened. We want to file this lawsuit because in the past 6 months, we've had lots of revenue lost.
I will be funding this lawsuit with $2,500 of my personal money to make sure that the message is clear.
Restaurant owners involved in the lawsuit point out that restaurants in the rest of New York State have been allowed to reopen indoor seating since June. And where some are located, customers can walk only a few blocks away to Nassau County and sit indoors.
What is happening in this country and to the city of New York in the past 6 months is destroying that very same American dream that this country was built on. The same dream that I was built on, that he has taught me my entire life.
Meanwhile, Governor Cuomo says NYPD needs to do a better job of enforcing regulations for NYC to reopen indoor dining. One restaurant owner strongly criticizes the governor's approach.
I don't know. I think he's just very against small businesses. I think he's a socialist leaning towards communist. So I don't think he believes in small business ownership. So I think he's trying to eradicate it. That's what I think.
The owners say if there is no plan come fall, they may have to close their doors for good. Reporting by Melina Weiskup and Henry Yan, NTD News.
Another major hotel in New York City is shutting its doors permanently. The health crisis has devastated the hotel industry in New York and across the country. NTD's Phil Zoe spoke with the head of a hotel association to see how they're faring.
The mayor has said there's going to be no indoor dining, so there's no business in restaurants and hotels. So it's just a double, triple whammy.
The Hilton Times Square Hotel in New York is closing permanently. According to a public filing, 200 employees will be laid off starting October. The president of the Hotel Association of New York City told us many hotels have already closed and many more may close soon.
Already a bad situation has become significantly worse. You know, we had 55,000 employees working, now they're barely 10,000. And the business is down 85% with over 150 hotels closed, some permanently.
Dantapani says the 14-day quarantine for visitors to New York City decimated the hotel industry. This is the worst he's ever seen it.
The quarantine has killed all domestic business, the 14-day quarantine. This is worse than any Great Recession that we had in 08, 9/11, .com crash.
In a letter to Congress last month, the American Hotel and Lodging Association said nearly 1 out of every 4 hotels could face foreclosure. The industry could lose more than $120 billion this year. Dantapani says analysts are telling him businesses aren't coming back until next September, and that it'll be another 4 years before the industry returns to pre-pandemic levels. Phil Zoe, NTD News, New York.
Labor Day weekend's coming up, and the NYPD says it's ready to crack down on big groups and house parties. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on the police chief's warning to keep the celebrations small.
Our message to New Yorkers: don't gather in large groups on the streets, anywhere in the city. And this goes for house parties that we have experienced on this holiday.
Monahan says Labor Day weekend house parties have poured out into the streets in previous years, which aren't allowed right now under the pandemic. The chief says they're not looking to make arrests, but they will make them if necessary and break up big groups. But besides the risk of spreading the CCP virus, he says these gatherings have a history of being violent.
And listen, it's a dangerous job for our cops, because as we're seeing on multiple incidences when we go into these large crowds, it's not one person with a gun. it may be 10 people with guns. So our cops have to be careful. We have to make sure as we're going into these events that we have more than enough cops on the scene.
New York's surge in shootings hasn't stopped. According to the NYPD, there were nearly double the number of shooting victims last week, a total of more than 1,200. The chief says they'll have enough cops on the street to break up any potential house parties. Miguel Moreno, NTD News, New York.
Still to come, England's top soccer league is going separate ways with the Chinese partner. The league is canceling its $650 million contract after it said it didn't get paid. And a Chinese state-owned company was recently added to the U.S. sanctioned list for building islands on the South China Sea. A major player in China's Belt and Road Initiative, it's left a trail of corruption and controversy across the globe. More on that after the break. And a new human rights report sheds light on the Chinese regime's special method of disappearing people. It estimates that tens of thousands have vanished in China because of it, and that number could be higher. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
Now we take a look at the special method of the Chinese Communist Party to make people disappear. The Australian government announced an update earlier this week about Australian Chinese TV anchor Chen Lei. According to officials, she's under what's called residential surveillance at a designated location in China. Chen works as a host for TV broadcaster China Global Television Network, or CGTN. It's the English language channel for CCTV, one of the Chinese Communist Party's most well-known media mouthpieces. Chen's detention at once again attracted international attention to China's so-called residential surveillance practices. Based on international human rights organization Safeguard Defender's latest report, on average every day this year, some 20 people will be disappeared in China by the state under this system. China legalized its residential surveillance at a designated location practice back in 2012. The report states that since then, police have used it to detain some 30,000 people. Once earmarked for the practice, victims are taken to a secret location. They are then isolated from the outside world for up to half a year. They're given no access to lawyers, friends, or family, and there's no policing oversight. Torture is reportedly commonplace, including beatings, sleep deprivation, threats, and other abuse. Compiling data from Chinese court verdicts posted to the Supreme Court database, Safeguard Defenders estimated that at least 28,000 to 29,000 people have been subjected to residential surveillance. But because China only publishes data for cases where a verdict is given, the real number could be significantly higher. U.S. State Department Under Secretary Keith Krach is likely to travel to Taiwan by the end of the month for trade talks. That's according to a report by Taiwanese national news Liberty Times. According to the report, the meeting will stand as the highest level talks between the two countries since ending diplomatic relations in 1979. The trip would be part of a new U.S.-Taiwan economic and commercial dialogue. The dialogue aims to strengthen U.S.-Taiwan economic ties in a number of ways, including semiconductors, healthcare, energy, among others. According to the report, the U.S. State Department and Taiwan's foreign ministry are already negotiating details. A trip will likely come sometime this month. It follows Taiwan's decision to end restrictions on U.S. beef and pork import at the end of August. The lift in rules is expected to come into play on January 1st. Krach thanked Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen on Twitter, writing, "The move demonstrated yet again that Taiwan is one of our best and most important partners," adding he looks forward to working with the nation to advance our mutual economic interests. Now we turn to another U.S. official's message to Asia, but this time it's a warning for mainland China. Defense Secretary Mark Esper gave a warning to the Chinese regime during a keynote speech on Wednesday. It was part of an event marking the anniversary of the Japanese surrender that ended World War II. Esper alluded to China with a careful choice of words, saying today, in the face of new challenges to this free and open order, we are working to build an even broader coalition of partners to protect the hard-fought gains of generations past and present, especially in the Pacific. He added,
"We share an important goal, defending the sacred principles that benefit us all: democracy, liberty, sovereignty, human rights, mutual respect, and the rule of law."
The Defense Department has turned much of its attention to the Indo-Pacific in the face of China's aggressive military presence in the area. Esper mentioned U.S. outreach efforts toward many countries in the region, and growing, deepening, and unifying this network must remain central to our collective strategy to ensure peace and prosperity for another 75 years and beyond.
We welcome every nation, especially those that have benefited most from today's international system, to join us in this effort.
He ended with a reaffirmation of the United States' commitment to the world today is the same one the U.S. made to the freedom-loving people of the world in 1941.
That we will remain ready to fight any foe and defend any friend, and that we will safeguard our values and all that we hold dear at every turn, in every place.
Adding that the U.S. will not back down, he described freedom as far too precious to do otherwise, and the sacrifice of those who came before us far too great.
The British Premier League is canceling its nearly $700 million agreement with its partner in China. The league says it didn't get paid. It means soccer fans in China will miss out on the new season, but it'll also leave a big hole in the league's accounts. It's already facing a record pre-tax loss this year. It is a political move from China? It's hard to tell. Details on the matter are reportedly private. The UK has recently banned Huawei and opposed Beijing's so-called national security law in Hong Kong. The former Chinese license holder, Suning Holdings, says it's simply a consequence of the pandemic. A Chinese state-owned company, China Communications, was recently added to the U.S. sanctions list for helping the Chinese military build an island in the South China Sea. But the company is also a major player in the China's Belt and Road Initiative, leaving a trail of corruption and other controversies in wake.
This is Sri Lanka's Colombo port. Here, a unit of China's state-owned construction giant, China Communications Constructions, is building a massive port city project for the South Asian country.
We see this as a project that will give new life to the country's economy.
But to fund the project, the country borrowed over $1 billion from China, which deepened Sri Lanka's already growing debt crisis. This after the Sri Lanka authorities borrowed hundreds of millions of Chinese money for another project at the port town Hambantota. To ease the debt, the country had to hand over a controlling 70% stake of the strategically important port to China and rented the port to China for 99 years. Despite government-sponsored studies showing the projects wouldn't be profitable, local authorities push it through anyway. These port city projects are part of the Chinese regime's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative, where the regime lends money to underdeveloped nations for building infrastructure. Such projects were often later commissioned to Chinese state-owned companies. The case of Sri Lanka is often cited by analysts and Western officials to criticize China's Belt and Road project for saddling countries with debt and fueling corruption. A New York Times investigation in 2018 shows that before getting the deal, the Chinese company and local Chinese diplomats had gone out of their way to support and fund the then Sri Lanka president's election campaign. But Sri Lanka is hardly alone.
We're now operating in more than 100 countries and regions outside China. 70% of our overseas projects are based in Belt and Road regions.
China Communications is the largest Belt and Road contractor. It recently made onto the U.S. sanction list for helping the Chinese military build artificial islands in the South China Sea. It was singled out by the State Department for leaving a trail of corruption, predatory financing, environmental destruction, and other abuses across the world. State Department official David Stilwell recently likened China Communications and others to modern-day equivalent of the East India Company, the trade giant used by Britain to expand its colonization.
These state-owned enterprises are PRC instruments of abuse, and we should highlight their improper behavior. In all of our societies, citizens deserve to know the differences between commercial enterprises and instruments of foreign state power.
For instance, in the East Africa country of Kenya, China Communications was accused of mistreating local railway workers. In 2018, staff members of the company were arrested for stealing some 1/3 of the daily earnings of the railway's ticket sales and allegedly bribing investigators. Similar cases of corruption were also found in the Philippines, Malaysia, Bangladesh, and Thailand. And in Australia, a construction company owned by China Communications was found supplying lead-tinted water to a children's hospital it built and using asbestos-filled panels. Companies added to the U.S. entity list are no longer able to buy U.S.-made products. They also have a reputation and investment cost to the companies, since investors, trading partners, and even banks can be scared away. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Coming up, Apple chip supplier Broadcom says it's running late on chip shipments. It could delay the release of one of Apple's highly anticipated products. Qualcomm is boosting its production of 5G smartphone chips, as well as 5G platforms for laptops. That and more after the break. August saw an additional 1.4 million jobs added in the U.S. That's less than July, but in line with expectations. One bright spot, the unemployment rate dipped below 10% for the first time since March. It was recorded at 8.4%. President Trump applauded the number today on Twitter. Economists say the sharp drop of unemployment is mainly because of businesses recalling workers who have been temporarily laid off. The job gains include 250,000 temporary census workers. Besides that, retail job growth was solid, another 250,000. Transportation and warehousing also gained nearly 80,000 because of the increases in e-commerce. You might have to wait a little longer to get the next iPhone. One of Apple's chip suppliers says it's running late on shipments.
Apple supplier Broadcom says its chip shipments will be later this year than most. That means the next iPhone will likely arrive after its usual late September launch date. In June, Broadcom warned that revenues for the quarter that just ended would be below expectations. They said it was because of a delayed phone launch from their large American mobile phone customer, which analysts believe is Apple. Broadcom said its chip shipments will run into the final quarter of the year. That's a quarter later than most. Many believe these shipments are for the next iPhone. Most analysts have already pushed out their expected launch date of Apple's new 5G-enabled iPhone to October. Travel restrictions from the pandemic disrupted work on the devices. Meanwhile, Broadcom is forecasting current fourth quarter revenue above Wall Street estimates. The company is encouraged by upcoming 5G phone launches, and the growing remote work market is causing strong demand for its data center chips.
Qualcomm is boosting its production of 5G smartphones and backing new 5G connected laptops. It wants to make 5G accessible to billions of people.
US chipmaker Qualcomm launched its 5G-ready version of its Snapdragon 4 chips. The new chip can run on cheaper phones priced at $125 to $250 that will be made available early next year. On Wednesday at a scale-back IFA Consumer Technology Fair in Berlin, Qualcomm's president Cristiano Amon said the chip will make 5G accessible to all smartphone users. He also announced a 5G platform to support always-on, always-connected laptops. These laptops intend to provide secure connections to company networks to suit people working from home. Amon said the demand for this technology will outlast the pandemic. Qualcomm is the biggest producer of 5G chips globally. CEO Amon predicted that including all chip makers, there will be around 750 million 5G smartphones shipped in 2022, topping 1 billion a year later. That would see 5G catch on 2 years faster than was the case with 4G.
Fiat Chrysler is bringing back the Wagoneer. It unveiled new visions of the Jeep Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer. The models were first introduced in 1962. The vehicles have 3 rows of seats, 2 large screens between the driver and passenger, a version of Jeep's famous 7-slot grille, and an aluminum American flag. Fiat Chrysler says the Grand Wagoneer is supposed to be a more luxurious hybrid version of the SUV. They're hoping to brand it as their flagship vehicle. Prices for the Wagoneers are expected to start at about $60,000 and top $100,000. Ford is giving new buyers a way to save on insurance. It's partnering with Metromile to offer pay-per-mile insurance, available in most Ford 2020 and 2021 car models. Metromile will directly track driver mileage and charge them accordingly. It means the less you drive, the less you pay in insurance. Metromile can save Ford owners an average of $741 a year. A person with any car brand can use Metromile and its mobile app and plug-in device to track mileage. But the Ford deal means direct implementation into a compatible car's onboard software. Traditional car insurance companies have faced criticism and lawsuits for not offering enough price flexibility during the pandemic. Apple is the latest big tech company to find a way to pass on the cost of digital taxes in Europe. The cost will end up with app developers. NTD's Patrick Hayden has more.
Apple says it will increase its charges for app developers after several countries implemented a new digital services tax. It's the latest tech giant to pass on the costs to its consumers.
What's unusual here is that it's a very direct pass on, and you can see that Google have just put their prices up by 2% to pass on this specific cost.
Another partner at Blick Rothenberg says it's difficult to prevent this sort of thing from happening.
Ultimately, tax almost always seems to be borne by the individual by the time it's passed down the chain. We've seen that the digital services tax is going to be passed on by the big tech businesses to their customers.
European nations originally tried to launch a new global tax on big tech, but negotiations stalled several months ago.
It's well beyond herding cats. You've got, I think, about 27, 28 countries in the OECD. You've got over 100 other companies that are participating in this project. Trying to get agreement is very, very difficult.
The White House has said the digital service tax is not fair and it discriminates against American companies. She said the ultimate solution is to have a global tax authority, but that's about as likely as having a global government. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
Up next, some Brits travel to China and pay for an organ. However, the source of the organ is not known. Members of the UK Parliament Upper House are taking action. And the UK is investigating in the development of a new generation of rapid virus tests. But you won't be going to the test center. The device will instead come to you. More on these after the break. French President Emmanuel Macron this morning celebrated the 150th anniversary of the creation of the French Republic.
In a speech at France's Pantheon Monument, President Macron asserted the state's authority, but acknowledged religious fundamentalism is growing. He said the republic must always be protected and that it's fragile and precarious.
There will never be a place in France for those who, often in the name of a god, sometimes with the help of foreign powers, intend to impose the law of a group.
The speech comes 2 days after the start of a trial of 14 people. They're accused of helping gunmen in the 2015 terrorist attacks on the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo and a Jewish supermarket. The government has addressed radical Islamism in France several times in recent months. France's Minister of the Interior said the risk of terrorist attack remains very high. According to an IFOP survey released today, 40% of Muslims living in France say religious laws are above France's laws. French President Emmanuel Macron says a new bill to combat separatism will be introduced this fall.
Over to Europe, UK Parliament Upper House members are appalled at forced organ harvesting in China. An amendment is proposed to ban forcibly obtained organs entering the UK. NTD UK's Neil Woodrow will bring us more news from Europe.
Thanks. Welcome to the UK newsroom with UK and European news. UK Parliament Upper House members are pressing the government to stop the UK from being complicit in forced organ harvesting in China.
There are long waiting lists for organ transplants in the UK, but someone from Britain or elsewhere can travel to China and pay for a new vital organ and return home. The source of that organ, however, is never made known. Lord Philip Hunt is proposing an amendment to a government medicine bill currently going through the House of Lords. The amendment could ensure forcibly obtained human body tissue and organs are not allowed into the UK.
Frankly, I've been appalled at the situation in China where we have enforced organ donation. People are dying as a result.
Lord Hunt said nearly a quarter of the 50 members present supported his proposal.
We simply cannot allow human tissue from victims of forced organ harvesting to enter the UK.
Last year's China Tribunal in London, chaired by the former International Criminal Court prosecutor Sir Geoffrey Nice QC, investigated if forced organ harvesting was happening in China.
Forced organ harvesting has been committed for years throughout China on a significant scale, and the Falun Gong practitioners have been one and probably the main source of organ supply.
Lord Hunt is hopeful his amendment will be added.
But I'm determined to bring this back to the floor of the House, and if necessary, we will force a vote on it. And I'm confident I can win that vote.
Falun Gong is a traditional Buddhist school Qigong practice. In the late 90s, there were an estimated 100 million people practicing it in China. Then the Communist Party banned it and launched a persecution without reason. Evidence points to forced organ harvesting beginning around 2001.
And the UK is investing in the development of rapid COVID-19 tests in hopes of picking up outbreaks early.
The Health Ministry says it's putting over $600 million into trialling a new generation of rapid 20-minute COVID tests.
The lab is in the back of a van and can go to the people who need the test, exactly as your viewers are saying.
The UK government hopes mass testing using faster tests can be rolled out towards the end of the year. Funding will also be used to trial population testing. People would be regularly tested regardless of symptoms in hopes that cases can be picked up before they spread widely.
And also give the test to people so that if they test negative, they can have confidence, to get back to the things that make life worth living.
Currently, only people with symptoms can get a test, although regular testing is available for certain professions, such as care workers.
A court in Spain has declared that a summer palace used by the late Spanish dictator Francisco Franco belongs to the state and his family should hand it over. The judge rules that the Pazo de Miras was given to Franco in 1938 in his role as head of state and not in a personal capacity. General Franco ruled Spain from 1939 to 1975 as a dictator. An estimated 150,000 people were killed by his regime. In 2018, news that the late dictator's grandchildren had put the palace up for sale for a reported $9.5 million caused an outcry. But Franco's grandchildren argue that they had paid for the renovation of the palace. They can appeal the ruling. Russian Prime Minister visits Belarus as the country's leader faces his biggest political crisis since coming to power 26 years ago.
As close allies, Russian President Putin says Russia has an obligation to help Belarus with its security.
Russia completely supports the sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity of Belarus.
There have been widespread protests since President Alexander Lukashenko, known as Europe's last dictator, declared a landslide victory for his sixth term in office on August the 9th. Lukashenko denies electoral fraud and blames external interference for the protests. He's showing no sign of backing down, despite Western powers threatening sanctions.
And Claire Williams, Formula One's only female team boss, will step down after Sunday's Italian Grand Prix. British-based Williams' team has been sold to US-based private investment firm Dorilton Capital. Claire Williams and her father Frank will step down, but the team will still race under the Williams name. The once dominant but now struggling team have not won a Grand Prix since 2012 and are currently last and without a point. Williams are the third most successful constructor in the sport's history, with 114 wins and 16 titles, but their last championship was in 1997. And the BBC is reversing its decision to omit the words from two patriotic songs at a classical music festival this month. The broadcaster planned to play instrumental versions of Rule Britannia and Land of Hope and Glory, which are normally sung by flag-waving fans. BBC said the break from tradition was due to COVID-19 restrictions of a small orchestra and no audience. Many accused the BBC of cutting the lyrics over associations with colonialism and slavery, sparking fierce criticism, including from the Prime Minister. Now the BBC says a select group of its singers will sing the lyrics. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Back to New York.
Coming up, production on The Batman stops again after star actor Robert Pattinson tests positive for the CCP virus. That and more after the break. NBA champion Steve Nash has been named head coach of the Brooklyn Nets squad that will be led by the dominant Kevin Durant next season. This is the first NBA coaching job for the 46-year-old. Nash is a two-time MVP winner and a Hall of Fame point guard. He played 18 seasons with the NBA and is fourth on the all-time assets list with more than 10,000. Nash will replace interim head coach Jacques Vaughn, who is being retained as an assistant head coach. And now it's time for a look at the latest headlines from the world of entertainment.
Any of this mean anything to you?
Warner Brothers says filming has been temporarily paused on The Batman after Batman actor Robert Pattinson tests positive for the CCP virus. Production had just resumed after a months-long hiatus due to the pandemic. The Batman has about 3 more months of material to shoot, and the hope is filming will be finished by year's end.
James, fate draws us back together.
A new trailer for No Time to Die is reminding James Bond fans that he'll be back on the screen soon after experiencing a CCP virus delay of his own. The 007 adventure, which was going to be released back in the spring, will now debut in November.
If we don't do this, there will be nothing left to save.
Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in.
Francis Ford Coppola hopes to pull audiences back into The Godfather 3 for its 30th anniversary. The famed director created a new cut of the film, which will be released in December. It'll have a new beginning and end, some rearranged scenes, plus a new title, The Godfather, Coda, The Death of Michael Corleone.
Mountain lions roam the hills surrounding Los Angeles, but this year the population has boomed. Local researchers have discovered more dens this year than ever on record. According to the New York Times, 5 mountain lion mothers contributed to the baby boom that started late in spring and ended in August. 13 adorable new baby mountain lions have been caught on camera. They were spotted in and around the Santa Monica Mountains in California. The population spike is official with 5 different dens of kittens. Never before have so many mountain lion families been seen in the area at the same time. This year beats 2015, a year when 4 mountain lions in the area became proud mothers. And that's all for now. Catch us again at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Jasmina Davis.
Schools are reopening in Wuhan and life seems to be going back to normal after lockdown. But one resident saw some alarming signs. China's state-run media launched another attack on U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, the latest from a TV documentary, but many Chinese netizens were surprised and objected to the language used. A Chinese state-owned company was recently added to the U.S. sanction list for building islands in the South China Sea. A major player in China's Belt and Road Initiative, China Communications has left a trail of corruption and other controversies across the globe. And a new report from an international human rights organization sheds light on the Chinese regime's special method of disappearing people. It estimates 20 people disappear on average in China every day, and the number could be higher. Tune in at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time and tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time to watch the full China in Focus.